employer branding is, again, the bigger just, I want you to know that we exist. I want you to understand what you're signing up for. Kind of akin to your example, I want you to know me. I want you to understand me. And I want you to make an informed decision. The recruitment marketing piece is when I'm actually ready to make decisions.
And I am super excited. We have had a couple of reschedules on both of our ends, but we have made it happen. Jade Harper, welcome to Employer Branding Unfiltered.
Thank you.
Hey, friend. Hey. So look, I want to get right into it for the viewers, for the listeners. We met each other through a mutual friend, but at a mutual event for people in our space. Shouts out to the Talent Brand Alliance and the Talent Brand Summit. I believe it was in Chicago.
It was. That was my first time in Chicago, too.
Wow. Okay. Got you.
Right?
And it was a time. There was a time had in Chicago.
A time was had in Chicago.
That is a fact. That is a fact. So shouts out to our homegirl, sister friend, Siobhan Thomas, who will also be on the show. So,
Girl.
hey, girl. So yeah, Jade, let's let the people know who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I am Jade Harper. I have been in the employer brand and recruitment marketing space for several years now, and I'm really excited today. Slightly nervous because I have no idea what will unfold, but I trust John to take me to in the right direction and have an open and unfiltered conversation around employer branding. Happy to do it.
I love it. I will not steer you or lead you astray into harm's way. We will make sure it's safe and free and unfiltered still. So look, a question I ask everybody who joins. I want to know when you first fell in love with employer branding, right? Because none of us went to school for this work. So how did you get into this crazy space we call employer branding?
Man, that's a fun one. So like a lot of people that I meet in these employer brand and recruitment marketing spaces, I kind of stumbled upon it. And I'm kind of going to answer two questions with one, a little bit of my career history and how I stumbled into it. So several years back, I started with a company in the research space. So my background, although I have a degree in communications, did a lot of internships that would have put me in front of the camera as like an anchor and different things like that. That didn't really appeal to me. I didn't mind. I wasn't shy in front of the camera, but it wasn't exciting. I didn't want to tell the news. I actually found that to be a little humdrum. And then the more entertaining side of things seemed to be led by those that already had a persona, already had a brand awareness out there in terms of people knowing who they were, having some history and some context on their background, and having a lot of intel on their personal life, which sounded like a no-no for me. So I ended up falling into research. So I did a lot of the data side of things. I pulled metrics. I analyzed metrics to see trend analysis, things of that nature. And in doing that, I found that I was an extrovert among a lot of super duper introverts. And not only that, but introverts that were not compelled to tell the story as much as to give you the numbers. So they were data people. They understood the numbers well, and they regurgitated to you, not in layman's terms. You know, they said it straight. They used terminology that may not have been familiar for others. And so it was an area of opportunity for me because I like to be people facing, to try to take the numbers, put it in layman's terms, and make it kind of relatable to broader audiences so that they would take action on those things. That over time manifested. I started to do things like get involved in employee resource groups or build relationships with team members that were in HR and tell them that, hey, listen, what I love about this job is that it's an opportunity to help people. I've always loved anything that involves helping people. I said, I also like about this job, this kind of storytelling element. I'd love to evolve that into more of a creative space because I think there are skills and capabilities of mine that are not being tapped into. And I was like, but the problem I'm having is that I keep knowing what I wanted. I keep knowing what I don't want to do and having a hard time articulating what I do want to do. And so a really great opportunity presented itself where I was at a company that was looking to split. And when they did split, they got a new head of HR, and that person only kept a few people from the previous regime and needed to hire a whole bunch of people. And so I met that person at the time that that transition was taking place and was kind of introduced to them informally, kind of like, hey, this is Jade. She already works for the organization. She has interest in this, that, and the third. I just thought maybe it'd be cool if you get to meet each other. And those informal meet and greets, unbeknownst to me, were actually interviews that transitioned into me taking a job opportunity. It was so vague that they didn't even have a job title at the time. They didn't know what they were going to call me. They didn't know that. They just knew that I like this aspect of what you already bring to the table. I like that you're an internal candidate, so I don't have to teach you the ways of the business. And then I like the fact that some of what you're intrigued by and want to do more of related to social media and like presence at a company that didn't actually have a career site. They had a landing page that you came to, but that landing page immediately dropped you into the applicant tracking system. We call it the ATS, where you can immediately start taking jobs and applying to jobs, but it wasn't giving you like a more detailed soft place to land that tells you about the company's culture and who we are and what we stand for. And here are the job functions we have. And here are details within each of those job functions. That level of depth did not exist. And so he, thankfully, was open to the parts in me that were unclear and was like, we'll figure it out as we go. And so he hired me. We ended up landing on the title project manager. And I became that and then some. And so in that role, I took on a lot of things. I helped manage award programs internally. I helped manage Take Your Child to Work Day at the organization. I helped manage internal HR communications, so their monthly newsletter that went out to the entire employee population. And then I also helped build a career site and manage some of that recruitment marketing and employer brand stuff. And when I got more and more involved in that, I started leaning really in on two factors: that career site, employer brand, recruitment marketing stuff, and the part that had me employee facing. I like them both, to be honest. And as I played with them more, and then I started to kind of put together pitches on like promotional opportunities where I can be called a employer brand manager or recruitment marketing manager, or maybe a little bit of both, a talent marketing manager, and pitch those things, I started to hit a bit of a wall where they were like, yes, I want you to do those things, but I don't want you to drop Take Your Child to Work Day to do it. And I don't want you to drop the award ceremony to do it. I need you to still be able to do that. And I was like, well, the direction I really want to take this and the level of tension that it deserves would require more from me than I can offer if I keep all those other things at the same time. And so for that and a bunch of other fun reasons, I ended up transitioning into a role that was dedicated to employer brand and recruitment marketing. And I fell in love and was off to the races after that.
Oh my gosh. What a journey. So
Tell me about it.
I I I understand and I can empathize with the development of the title before the industries were even aware that there was a title for that work, right? I think
Absolutely.
we've been in this game long enough to have seen the evolution of our space, to where there are now not only clearly defined titles for this work, but I'm seeing director or senior director roles in this space now, and way more applicants or job opportunities for employer brand professionals than there were when we got started. So I love the evolution of that, and I also hear uh, the the famous, well, we want you to do all that and keep all this. And by the way, can you do that without a team? like,
That's it.
like, oh man, therapy has helped me to suppress those memories. But but it is I think classic bootstrapping, right? Where companies are trying to figure out, and I think most of the organizations that saw the need for what we do started by wanting to get their recruiters into social, and just trying to figure out a way to make social and recruitment come together in some way, shape, or form. And oh, by the way, if we can develop this thing called an employer brand, even better. Can you do that too? Uh, which, hey, look, I mean, for those who are entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial, this is like the jam, right? This is the best place
Absolutely.
to be because you can create your own world. So long as you're able to sell and get the buy-in from those who are writing checks. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I heard leadership change, which I think is probably one of the most under articulated critical points of our work, right? Especially when we're hired in by a manager who gets it, or a leader who understands the need, at least to some degree. And then that leadership changes, and you might inherit somebody who doesn't. I'm sure you have some stories around that where you've had leadership changes in the midst of trying to build or create these undertakings.
Yeah, that's fun. What I love about challenges is that challenges presents new opportunity, and sometimes it comes in
Yeah.
ways that you didn't expect. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you didn't expect it, it's probably still, at least from my experience, ends up working out for the best.
Mm-hmm.
So, that there's so much to say in that space. I think that I love and celebrate those that have understood this business, and maybe even if they didn't understood it, had a really keen interest in learning, so that as you explained and conveyed to them what you felt like were priorities and things that they should prioritize, then it was helpful. I find that there's some really, from my personal experiences, there's some real interesting nuance depending on whether or not you are a party of one or you are a team. And then there's also really interesting nuance whether you're working within the HR or talent acquisition function, or if you're actually sitting underneath marketing as opposed to within
Mm,
HR.
big
Those have been
difference.
some of the biggest differences in management approaches, styles, techniques, things of that nature. So I've found that for me, I actually like both TA and marketing. That part wasn't, I wouldn't say I prefer one versus the other on that instance.
Okay. Yeah, I was
I
gonna
found
ask.
that,
I was gonna ask
yeah,
where
I
have you sat? Where do you think it should sit? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open. I'm open. I think that
Okay.
there's some benefits to it being within marketing because they're thinking bigger than just how many applicants did we get for this one job or these two jobs or these five really important jobs, and there's more room for the broader employer brand vision. I find that TA tends to be more recruitment marketing centric. I want the job. It's the job. It's the job. It's the job. Not, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money just to make people aware of us. I don't want impressions and reach to be the key performance indicator. I want applicants, and I want quality applicants, and I want them in abundance. And I also want talent pools that I can delve over and dip into as I need to. And that's it. The rest of that stuff is cute, but that's my priority. That is the nuance I've found when you're within the TA function, because that's what their drivers are. And the only thing they can give to us that they can't, that they can have, that can help recruiters from their standpoint, at least it seems, is this whole how many applicants did we get and were they qualified, so that it's impacting a positive time to fill, so that it's impacting these other metrics that recruiters are measured on. In marketing, since you're not in the TA space, I find that they're actually much more open to an expansive thought process around employer brand, because they understand the importance of awareness. Like, before we even get you to the part where we're asking you to apply to a job, do you know who we are? Like, do you? And do you know whether or
Great
not
question.
this is a place that you want to be for both of us? Is it mutually exclusive? Like, it's one thing to tell you that we are this, we believe in this, we want to do this, we want to provide this. But when we say we have an entrepreneurial spirit, we also mean that this is not easy, and that you're going to have to be a self-starter, and that you're going to have to be open to doing more than this job description explains. Is that something that you enjoy? Kind of close to your sentiment originally with us in this space. A lot of us do tend to have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit and are open, or at least have had to experience being in kind of a jack of all trade roles at some point in time. You have to have that prowess in some organizations in order for this to be a good fit. Because if you're like, no, I need it to be very clean, very cookie cutter. You tell me to do this, I do the thing, and then I clock out and go about my business. And it's already mapped out for me. That may not be some organizations. And so that employer brand piece really helps make that clear. Tells you about the
Yeah.
culture, helps you understand who they are. And I find that sometimes within the TA function, that is cute. If you
They're not worried
delivered on
about
the
that.
if you delivered on the applies, then maybe I'll give you a little more money so you could do that awareness thing you're talking about. But right
Yeah.
now, I just need this.
So, oh man, I love this. You're going to all the hot spots early. So, so I love that you are clearly identifying the differences in outcomes depending on where you sit, right? And that's super crucial. And I think historically we've not talked about it because it's always been assumed that employer brand sits in TA or recruitment marketing should sit in TA. Okay, but now I'm starting to hear more and more folks who are sitting in the marketing side or the corporate comm side, and their budgets are bigger. The understanding for their work, to your point, is higher. Right? There's a receptivity to the work that's being done there from the brand side. Still, I think there's some work to be done in understanding how we sort of straddle the two worlds between talent acquisition and broader branding. But I look at it like dating. Like, if you sit in TA, people want the marriage proposal before the first date or on the first date. If you sit in marketing, you're more open to let's go on a couple dates to figure out if there's a vibe, if there's chemistry, if you like us. Would you call me back for a second date? And I'm not pressed to pop the question on the second or third date, right? Like you get some breathing room there. And I wonder how can we get TA more comfortable with what's required to build these relationships if you truly want to be the employer of choice, not just drive more applicants and hope that quality increases, right? What are your thoughts there? How do we get to this TA comfortability with building relationship as a metric for success with EB?
Ooh. One of the ways, and I'm sure there are multiple, because it's not a one size fits all solution for everyone. I think it depends on your TA teams. But one of the common threads that I found do help is giving them a diverse slate of materials to share. So they have networks, right? They're leveraging LinkedIn quite often, most of them, or Indeed, depending on what types of jobs we're talking about. And then they're just network in general. Like if they've been hiring for tech roles as long as they've been recruiters and they've been recruiting for 20 years, they might even have just almost like old school Rolodex style of a whole bunch of people that they know that are in that space. What I find is that there's opportunity to give them more content to have them be your advocates. So when you're building your employer brand messaging, your video content, your employee stories, all those different pieces and elements, getting them to share that in their network opens them up to thinking about their network as more than just a, hey, I got another hot job. Come check me out when you're ready. It keeps these other elements of engagement ticked. So giving them the content to do that. I find that some organizations have better integration there where they might have a tool or a resource that they can leverage that their TA teams have access to that help them deploy content to their LinkedIn page that the employer brand or the communications team is curating. And then they can pick and choose what pieces of that they want to share, whether it's the company just won a recent award or here's a new employee story that's specific to this tech space job, or here's here's my personal story. Here's a picture I took at an event that I had on site. And then also, here's this job post that's specific to this one particular role or these 5 particular roles that I'd like you to apply to. So I find that giving them, providing them the resources to help push that out to their network more broadly helps them think about that as like more of a dating and give me more information along the way as opposed to immediately, I'm proposing, yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The relational content for sure, I think, is a way to increase not only the engagement on an external perspective with prospective talent, but also to get more people internally involved and really connected. But that's like down the line activation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna bring us all the way back to sort of that business case or that buy-in case for what you need to do as an employer brand leader, right? So let's say you're starting fresh, no EVP, no employer brand, no activation strategy, and you got to start with an executive leader who says, "All right, we need whether it's your chief HR officer, CEO, whomever, we need an employer brand. That's the umbrella statement. Jade, you're here. We brought you here to build this. where do you start? And I want this is for perspective for the newly the newly initiated employer brand professional who's been given this very task and scenario, but can benefit from the wisdom of someone who has done this before successfully and learned some things along the way. So where do you start in terms of the buy-in, the business case build up, uh, and education, even for executive leadership?
Yeah. So I have some answers to that, but I must
Yeah.
say I've had the luxury of joining organizations that had the foundational piece done. So they had the case study already done. They had the baseline of like, why are we of value to this organization? That part was done. It was just a matter of building out like the careers channel to align with that, or doing the research necessary to build an EVP. But the very first time that somebody said, I want to make this happen, I wasn't there for that. Now, I mentioned being in an organization where I came in as a jack of all trades. Initially, was called like a project manager, and did a lot of things. And I was trying to make a case for building up the employer, but I was doing that in my very early stages. So what I understood at that time, based on the relationship and dynamic that I had with my manager and the head of HR, was just trying to take what we were doing and explain how that could have a bigger impact if we were able to give more focus and attention. So my angle at that time was, okay, we built a careers page of sorts. It could be more expansive. Here are the ways that we can be more detailed in the ways that we cover these priority segments, so that they all get a little bit more meat and potatoes about their nuance, because working in tech may be very different than working in legal, and working in legal is very different than working in whatever other, project management, whatever it is. And those are some key priority areas, and we need to give them all an opportunity to showcase the nuance. So that was one piece. Another piece was that we were doing some social play here and there. But I was like, this would be more meaningful if there was a broader strategy, like a bigger understanding of like, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, it's one thing to just show up and make noise. We can do that. But what are we saying exactly? Like, we can put out content all the time that just says we have jobs and we're doing this and we're cool and we're a leader in the industry. Cool. But like, what
Why
makes you
should
different than
anybody
the
give a shit?
other,
Yeah.
yeah, what makes you different than the other people that are leaders in the industry, and things like
Right.
that? How do we differentiate ourselves? And so it was that, which I think still falls into how I might approach it at this stage in the game. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time I didn't have a toolkit to reference. I didn't have a community of employer brand and recruitment marketing professionals that could pour into me and kind of show me some examples of what they pitched. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a lot to go off of, except for saying this is what we're doing now. And I think it could be much more impactful if we added this much more money, this much more time, this much more content, this much more specificity. And in order to get the answers to that, I'd love to partner with marketing. And if you want to make this an internal play and use some of the stuff that we're getting from our internal surveys that we're doing with the company, to understand from the employee, because they really are our voice. Us trying to make sound without them doesn't make sense. We are the employer brand because we are supposed to be speaking on behalf of all the employees, as opposed to creating a mantra and then saying, go memorize the script, everybody, and go tell people that this is who we are. That's who we're supposed to be getting it from. So it'd be helpful if we probe them by asking a couple of questions about, what do they love about being here? And, what do they want to see? What do they want to see change? What attracted them? What are the things that would keep them, so that we can build a story around that we can tell to everyone that comes directly from our employee base. So it would be about getting the research internally from our employee base. There are wonderful organizations that support with getting external insights on industry standards that would be helpful. And then if there's at least something that you're doing that kind of taps into that space, helping to understand how I can really dial it up as it relates to those things. If I had more support, more resources, more funding, whatever it is, to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the insights and the research are critical. And I think even at that base layer, and hearing that you have sort of come into existing operation and now are, tasked with refining it, enhancing it, amplifying it. I think often is a lot of the times there's rarely do I see companies that have nothing and have never done anything, right? They exist, but it's not as many as there were before. So usually it's like a refresh, or we've had a lot of leadership change, or we've grown significantly through acquisition. So now we need to figure out who we are, and reestablish that. So there's always a place, I think, for research. But I'm even, you know, I'm wondering. This is getting people into my crazy thoughts and musings, but I'm wondering how many leaders who say they want an employer brand actually know what it's supposed to do. Blink twice if you can't answer that question. Now it's but I say that because I still find that there's so much education needed, because this isn't a traditional function, right? And so I think employer brand often equates to increased hires, which we know that that's not how that works, right? That's an extension of, or an outcome from, recruitment marketing efforts, maybe even recruitment marketing technology, some storytelling, but employer branding is as I like to say, it's the articulation of a seat being available for a butt to be in. It is not the thing that puts the butt in said seat. Right? Because you don't know about the seat, then how can your butt find it? Anyway, I'm working on the analogy, but the point being, I think that there's a lot of education still missing, and that becomes our responsibility. So, how do you find yourself helping your leadership to really understand the differences and the nuances between things like an employee value proposition versus the employer brand tagline or creative that goes with it, and even the activation tactics around recruitment marketing or even awareness building?
So, for starters, that's a tricky one. I think it's dependent upon the organizations I work for. There have been some where they separate employer brand and recruitment marketing. And there have been others where you need to do both. And even though you need to do both, you probably are heavily doing one more than the other, depending on their needs, because they are setting the tone in most instances. So if ever there's an opportunity for me to push back and or to differentiate, because I'm responsible for both, I usually start with the basics around employer branding. Is again the bigger, just I want you to know that we exist. I want you to understand what you're signing up for. Kind of akin to your example, I want you to know me. I want you to understand me. And I want you to make an informed decision. The recruitment marketing piece is when I'm actually ready to make decisions. And I'm just telling you that these are the job titles that are available, that you can now, here are the candidates that you can potentially be with. But I need to sell them first. I need to sell holistically, like what we stand for. All of our, people that you're considering marrying, if we're going to use your analogy, all of our candidates, or our clients, if you will, that are looking to marry, have these baselines. Here's what they stand for. Here's what their values are. Here's what here's why they're different than others. Here's how we vetted them. Here's like the baseline of just making sure that this is something you want. If I think about dating, you might care about things like religion, politics, whether they're kind, what do they want to have children, don't they? What their relationship with their families look like? Are they close knit or not so close knit? Do they want to stay in a centralized location, or are they global, and we could live anywhere at any time, any place? Like those kind of things are the employer brand pieces. And so I try to separate that in any presentation or communication that's sent to someone in senior leadership, so that they don't bleed. Because sometimes when you're presenting them information all at once, they don't know where the separation is. So I separate them for you. Everything in the employer brand space is one whole set of slides and presentations. And then I make a big distinct switch to, okay, now we're talking about recruitment marketing. And then we get into the weeds. So the candidate's name is John. The candidate's name is Jade. The candidates, they're looking to get married in 2 weeks. So do you want to put in an application or no? And so that's my separator, is really just making sure that I try not to talk about them at the same time, that I give dedicated time and space, or real estate in a slide or some form of communication that puts them under their umbrellas to help keep your mind keeping those two things separated. The other thing I do that helps, I find, for certain senior leaders, is putting those KPIs on there. That needs to be in their face as often as humanly possible, because I find that when I don't have them in your face as often as humanly possible, then you will find yourself, you'll find people delving into this recruitment marketing space as often as they can. And sometimes, if you're not a believer that the applies themselves sit within the EB or the recruitment marketing space, then we're talking a funnel that we don't even tap into, or the part of the funnel that we don't even tap into is where they're going to want to take the conversation. Oh my God, this video was amazing. It spoke about our manifesto. Awesome. How many applicants did we get? So again, keeping the KPI at the forefront, even if a little small section in the corner of a slide, like just as an opportunity for you to reiterate what we're looking to accomplish here, and then speak to that. So if we're looking to reach over 1 million people, then always say that reach needs to get, we're either above or below that benchmark. This is what we're always looking to as our North Star. Helps to keep the conversation in the buckets that they're supposed to be in.
Yeah. This is so good, because keeping the the separation between church and state, as it were, your employer brand and its KPIs distinctly separate from your recruitment marketing and those KPIs, I think, is a great way to keep leaders from confusing the intent and outcomes. Really, I think that's strong. I should take note of that. The other side of that is, now, what are those measurements for employer brand impact? Because let's be honest, these organizations are spending a significant amount of money on building this brand, right? So first, understanding who they are as an organization, what their employees' lived experiences are, to then craft that into messages and narratives that not only recruiters can use, but also that employee ambassadors can amplify. What do we get for all of that, right? If it's not this tangible thing like an applicant, because the Holy Grail is still undiscovered yet in terms of connecting a employer brand engagement to an actual hire, right? We still can't do that succinctly, let's say. There's some things we can get close to, but either way, what should be the measure of employer brand? Is it pure engagement? Is it reach? Is it number of views? What are you using as your?
I would say in all of those. So overall reach is good. Impressions are nice, but we know that includes duplication. So I'm just going to simplify and say reach in this instance, so that we just get, if Jade saw it, give me that one credit, as opposed to the 5 times that Jade saw it, the 10 times that Jade saw. So reach is probably a really strong one. And we want to make sure that that number is as high as it can be, right? Because conversion rates are always significantly lower than the number of people that you reached. So having high reach numbers is a strength. Another one is you're usually driving them to more content. So that's your career pages. So getting those views up and actions taken on those pages would be helpful. Not only just the number of people that came to your homepage or said dedicated landing page, but also if they actually stayed long enough to watch some of the video content or read some of the context that you provided, is a measure that's worth considering, because I would say a more engaged person spent a little bit more time. They may not watch a 5-minute video in its entirety, but you'd like to believe that they stayed more than 30 seconds, because you need them to have consumed something while they were there. So those are helpful. If you create video content, which we know video is king in terms of the forms and ways what people like to receive information. Ironically, we keep wanting those numbers to be high, and it's cool for them to be high in terms of the number of people that viewed your video, but not in terms of how long the video is. It would be better to have more pieces of video content that are shorter than 1 or 2 pieces of video content that are really, really long. And it could be rich, like movie quality, okay? But if it's more than about 2 or 3 minutes, and that's pushing it, then we've lost them, and a lot of what you put all that time and effort into is not being seen. So even if you decided to leave it somewhere on a landing page, making snackable bites out of that, those key points, those key phrases that you loved, all throughout that 2 minutes, 3 minutes segment, and turn them into 15 and 30-second little quips, that's what's going to draw people in, because they don't have a lot of time and their attention spans are much shorter. But video views are great. If you are able to create talent pools, like if you have the infrastructure to bring in talent pools, I think that's another one that you can start to measure and say that, like, hey, I sent out these things for awareness, and then the call to action was join our community so you can learn more. And I say that with the caveat of you've got to have a really strong commitment to producing content within that space. If you don't, then don't. Then ignore that part of what I just said, because it means nothing if I
Yeah.
created it, put you there, and then we're just hoping that every now and then a recruiter pulls 2 or 3 people out of that, but there's no ongoing newsletters, communications, emails, that kind of thing. But in spaces, 'cause I've been in functions where we were constantly, at least monthly at minimum, churning out information to these communities of people. If there's something that consistent, then I would use that as a measure for sure, and be able to say that that number is growing or increasing in some way, shape, or form, because it means that we're creating pools for you that you can source. And it also means that they're intrigued enough that whatever got them here, they want more of it. They're actually opting into you sending them more information about your organization. And it gives you lots of great opportunities to share more of your gems, and sometimes even repeat things that you thought they saw before, because again, short attention span. So it could be the same information, just kind of tweaked a little bit, and it'll end up still serving its purpose. I mean, I think about it
Yeah.
akin to a lot of brands that I see day to day when I think about products. Like, it takes me sometimes multiple times to see a certain type of shoe or a certain type of drink before I actually buy it. Like,
Hmm.
but the
Yeah.
repetition is part of what kind of kept it top of mind. Like, wow, I wonder, I feel like I've heard about that somewhere. I guess I should try it. You know what I
Right.
mean? So there's
Right.
that. But yeah,
Yeah.
those are a few. I hope that was a couple good examples.
Those are great examples. I mean, I'm hearing CRM, I'm hearing content strategy, I'm hearing, active engagement, multiple engagements. It's not just I post and then I get. There is no casino for employer brand and recruitment marketing in that slot machine style, but um, you bring up a couple of things, and one of which is the video content, even the length of the content. We know that attention spans are super short. I know at last check we have the attention span of goldfish now. I don't know if it has lessened since then. I don't know what would be less, but so that your media mix, where you're putting your content, who you're designing content for, and with all of the social platforms, if we're just talking big four, between TikTok, Facebook, Insta, and X, you know where does that leave your career site in terms of being the resource that you're trying to direct traffic to, but you're competing for the attention that these other sites are getting way more just inherent or natural engagement from? So the question I have for you, and this is really more of an existential, bigger industry question about the value of career sites anymore, right? Because, yeah, historically they were the place where candidates would get more information about you. But as we know, there's between like 12 to 18 different touch points a candidate is hitting besides your career site, or inclusive of your career site. So where do you spend the time and invest from an energy perspective or even content perspective when the career site is really like that last stop, or maybe that last stop before they hit apply?
That's, well, the original question was like, what do we need them? At this point, don't, I think we could get there. I think we could get there. At this
Okay.
moment, no, I wouldn't say from any of the organizations that I worked for or work for, could we remove them today? I wouldn't say yes to that.
Sure.
But could we get there? Maybe. I mean, I don't like to say no to anything because I think there's some things that exist today that I would have never guessed 10 years ago. Employer brand didn't exist more than 10 years ago. So I
That's
don't
right.
say no to anything. I think that I do agree that with quick, short attention spans, quick consumption, that if you had a really robust social media plan and some other things, that you could maybe you could potentially try another avenue. But the challenge is, I don't know where the single source of truth is when it's a lot of information through a lot of mediums to reach a lot of people. And sometimes if you're really strategic and we're getting more recruitment marketing focused, targeted to a certain
Mm,
skill set, capability, location, region, and all of that,
hmm.
I need a single source of truth. So if it's not, and then, and when you're on all these different platforms, there's not necessarily a lot of text space for you to build the level of information that a career site holds. Um, so until that problem is solved, I wouldn't know. Now, I'm not saying that your single source of truth, and some people probably still, I don't know if anybody actually doesn't have a career site and just go straight to ATS, or maybe invest in something like Glassdoor or the Muse or somewhere else to like let it live. But that's still kind of the same thing. It's just housed by a different person. It's still in some senses treated as your career site. So my answer is right now, no. Ultimately, could it be? Yes. But I think that in order for it to exist, there still has to be somewhere that you're saying, amid all the noise, the single source of truth is this, and what is that if it's not your career site?
Well, I'm with you, and I love that you're keeping an open mind because, to your point, we didn't have AI 10 years ago. Shit, we didn't have AI 2 years ago. Uh, and what the possibilities and the doors that has opened.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I tend to live down the street and around the corner on shit, which gets me in trouble a lot. But instead of just being right here, right now on the porch where I should be, but but I'm like, if the career site becomes what I think it could, y'all are hearing this first on Employer Branding Unfiltered. Um, I imagine it you land on a page where it's completely blank, and the only thing that's there is a prompt button that says, "What do you want to do?" And from there, the site will unfold into an experience that's catered and tailored to what you say you want to do. I want to be a back end developer. Okay, cool. The engineering world now opens up, and you've got stories from engineers, and you've got, some of the products that we've built and where we're going for the future. But it's you don't have like pages and pages of content that's irrelevant to the moment while you're there. Now,
Mm.
how we get there?
Right. And the machine behind that, please tell me more.
Look, shit, I might have to write some stuff down here. I mean, you want to go in on this? We just build our own. Like, but I'm saying like this I think becomes the next logical step in terms of customization or personalization, which is everybody's trying to figure that out right now. Um, I want to make sure that we also don't forget that there's this little thing called DEI and the evolution of companies' positions on this space in the last, I'd say, 18 months, even as of the date of this recording, has been vast and it has been quick in terms of the energy shift. From an employer branding perspective, one of our prime directives, is to showcase the culture of an organization so as to increase awareness, attract, engage, and retain talent. How are you doing that? Where are you finding yourself in this, uh, you know, zeitgeist of wanting to project our commitments as an organization on the one hand, but also in a way where a lot of organizations are rebranding DEI. Now it's more so inclusion or belonging or culture. And how are you approaching the authentic articulation of culture in a way that still gives voice, space, and I think full energy to the complexity and the nuances of the communities within the organization?
One example that came to mind while you were talking that I think answers your question is most companies, hopefully, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of companies tend to do a pretty reasonably good job of speaking of cultural awareness months and like holidays and corporate, I mean, not corporate, national observances. So that's anything from Juneteenth to Black History Month to Pride Month to, all the things. I find that the way to make it feel authentic in those approaches is instead of saying something relatively generic, like just happy so and so this month or happy this month, or that we turn it into an opportunity to showcase what we're doing to celebrate or honor that particular occasion. So that could be us tapping into some of our sustainability efforts. That could be us tapping into our employee business resource groups and talking about what they're doing to really add voice and build community within their various categories, and allowing them to kind of have an input on the story. So that's one of the ways that I feel like I do it to try to keep it top of mind and make it feel authentic, as opposed to trying to do something that feels a little bit too check the box. Now, I can't appease everyone. I won't appease everyone. There's always going to be somebody that's just not 100% convinced, especially if it's in alignment with something that's happening in that current climate that just doesn't make them feel good. They're going to see it through the same glasses as they see everything else. But I think it helps if you are moving away from generic, allowing those people in those communities to be a part of the voice that creates that content, and then push out that content during those months. It's a little bit broader than just saying happy. I'm going to use me as an example and say happy Black History Month, but tell me something. Tell me that you have a group of people, recruiters even, or team members that went out to HBCUs. It was 7 of them they went to, and they did this to that community of individuals, whether they offered them jobs or whether they gave them a training course or whatever it may be. But tell me what you're doing that aligns with your support of that particular community, as opposed to just saying, thank you for existing. So
Sure,
that's
sure.
one of the ways that I try to take something that may feel a little generic, sometimes inauthentic, and make it authentic, and also make it a priority and bring in the voices of those that are a part of those communities.
Yeah. I think that's a great play from a content perspective to keep the stories, at the forefront, putting the people first, right? The humanity at the forefront. I've got friends, I'm sure you do too, who are at companies who have openly pulled back or completely 180'd on their commitments to DE&I, and they're in positions where they have to push an employer brand at these companies, right? Which is ultra tough,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they themselves are from a historically underestimated community. Um, that, you know, any thoughts on how they can approach that, right? Because this is, while there's still a small few companies who have like completely obliterated and, you know, stepped away from DE&I, for employer branders who still want to tell those authentic stories, who still want to show the cultural richness of their employee populations, but in that landscape, what kind of advice would you give them?
I've never been faced with that challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know. To be honest with you, if it really felt like a complete just I'm throwing all of it away, I
Hmm.
would probably reevaluate whether or not that was someplace that I wanted to be a part of, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to figure out. And I don't know if I'm that person to
Hmm.
figure out. I mean, I think if I had relationships, I think behind closed doors, I'd probably say, do you understand what this is doing, and convey it from my perspective, because I'd hope that the relationship that I have will help them see what this means and how this might impact other communities. But if that wasn't enough, I don't know if I could keep generating something that either doesn't give voice to diverse looks, feels, cultures, perspectives at all. I don't know if I could do that, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. So I feel like the conversations that the advice that I would give is more about, is this what you want?
Yeah.
Does this align with what you stand for? Have you conversed with those thought decision makers? Or, do you have an opportunity to speak to them about what this means and what needs to remain in order for this to just have a shell of something that I can build off of? Would probably be my first step
It,
before trying to generate something out of nothing.
it's a no, it's a fair answer, and one that I would probably lean towards too. Is, really, does that align with your values, and can you sleep at night selling a narrative that is completely antithetical to not only what you believe but also what the experience is? So, great advice, and I think that's something we should always be doing, is evaluating our alignment to the brands that we build. It's tough. It's tough. I know sometimes people sell products for companies that they don't use themselves. Okay. But from a branding perspective, we're creating this bridge between aspiration and opportunity. And these are real human beings' lives that are, in the balance based on the information and the perspective that we provide through this work. So, yeah, this is bigger than just like, hey, let's do some cool, emotionally heartstring pulling videos and putting them out on Instagram to get people to apply to our jobs. Like, no, there's real people on the end of those applications making decisions for people beyond themselves. So, I think we have a duty to be transparent and honest about what we're putting out there, which is a perfect segue. Uh, one question for you, that I really have seen the transition, but I'm hoping that there's acceleration behind in this notion of transparency being the new authenticity, and we get this authenticity sort of drumbeat for years now about it has to be authentic and okay, but authenticity I've seen up to date really land in the space of just like connecting to the emotions of the viewer or the candidate, but not necessarily being transparent. And so, what is your take on sort of this evolution of transparency being almost a requirement for the modern day candidate? They want to know the things that I see what you're putting out there on your socials and your career site. That's cute. Everybody says the same things. Tell me who you really are. Back to the dating world. Yeah, this first date was amazing. You said all the right things. I met your representative. But who are you really? Do you think employer brand will get there?
I would like them to. I find, from what I've observed, I find that it seems a little easier for them for someone to get there when they're in a smaller organization. So when you're, so sometimes I would assume, and I have to say that I've always, within this employer brand recruitment marketing sphere, have always worked for bigger businesses. So very, very large population employee bases. And so, although there might be moments and spaces that feel entrepreneurial in nature, it's still very, very big. And so, because it's very big, I think that's why that sometimes that feels like such a challenge, and that transparency only shows up in the way in which you described. Because there are so many buckets and silos that exist within really big infrastructure, that there are times that certain places and spaces within the organization actually reflect what you're describing, and there's others that are evolving, we'll say. Um, and so, but I find that when you're a little bit smaller in scale, it might be a lot easier to like own up to a mistake out loud, like as a part of
Mm-hmm.
your transparency. Like, especially like, I think I've seen people that work in product spaces do it best. Like when they have a snafu with food or with a shoe, they'll just make a joke of it and then like outline how that actually made the shoe better because of this mistake. We did this new nuanced thing, or because this burger had this accident, we reformed it and now it's on a new bun and whatever. And they just kind of admit it and then just show you the newest, shiniest toy. I think that there's opportunity for that through employee story. I find that we, as those that are asking for these stories, have a tendency, we have the rights to edit out what we don't want, right? And so I find that there are times that people will be really candid with you and they'll tell you both the best parts of their experience and some of the challenges they've had. And so the small, again, it might be small baby steps, but some of the small baby steps toward transparency is trying not to remove it. So like when I think about how like writing a blog, an employee would have made reference to the fact that like, I actually applied here 4 times before I actually got the job, would typically be something that you might avoid referencing because that can be misconstrued. But it's their truth, and they ultimately are happy here, and they've been here now for X amount of years. So it is a success story, but I mean, don't take it out because it's part of their truth. Or like when there's some people who have said, I've had challenges with management before. Now it's better, but I've held 3 positions at this organization, and one of them I had some challenges with the management. And they're really good. I appreciate everybody because everybody tries to have, a really good business decorum. So they'll say it with, all the right level of tact, but they'll say it. And I just feel like if they took the time to say it, find a way to let that part of the story be told, to embed those elements of transparency so that it's just not always the clean stuff. Don't just say that they've been here for 5 years, held 3 different positions, and they're awesome. Tell them that they applied 5 times before they got that job.
Yeah.
But the tenacity behind applying 5 times, or maybe whatever they did to like, I don't know, finesse their resume to better align with the role might be that thing that a potential candidate needs to hear to be like, okay, I actually applied once too, and I was going to give up. But now that I heard so-and-so's story, I may think differently. So just finding a way to keep some of those truths in there instead of just only keeping the best parts of everyone's story.
Yeah. So I think that there's so many ways you can leverage the adversity stories, especially those of multiple applies before getting hired. Like, I think that's a testament to the strength of the brand itself, that people would apply multiple times or want to run through brick walls to still work here, regardless of how many times it took to get here, because they know that it aligns so much with what they want to do or their cause or whatever the case may be. I think that's a great story. I also think like those unvarnished truths of, look, we've got some challenges in the middle management area that I voiced and nobody heard. And I had some bumps along the way, and I've been in 3 different departments or whatever the case may be. I think it'd also be a great positioning for leaders to respond directly to those and then showcase how they took action, right? Like there's ways in which you can craft these negatives that don't just become a legal headache or give them heartburn and want you to edit those pieces out, but really showcasing like an end-to-end, here was the problem, here was the approach, here was the result, and the active hands by management, because our culture says, we rally around each other. So how do we showcase that? Like there's so many ways. I just think there's still a hesitancy because of that fear of not always showcasing the champagne and the roses, right? And
yeah, there's a lot of fear there, which is why I'm
100%.
saying even in my experiences, I think there's still area of the opportunity. I don't think I have the answer. I think there are steps that are being taken to get closer to what would feel like the true definition of transparency. I think I lean more into authenticity at this current stage, because I just find that even as the employee that's telling your story, you're like, if they're even daring enough to be that candid in a public forum about the organization that they're still being employed by, that's brave. And I want to make sure everybody still feels protected. It's a delicate balance. So the steps are small. The focus for me is a little bit more authenticity, but where there's an opportunity to kind of move it just a little bit closer, then I'm open to that.
That's it. That's all we can do is move this inch by inch further than where we got it. So look, I want to round out with a final question. It's something that we do with all of our guests. It's ask a question, leave a question. or answer a question and then leave a question. So, our last guest, and I think this is a really good question for you, asked, and the sort of the setup is, because employer brand is still a growing space, there's not a lot of leadership opportunities in the titling sense, right? There's really not. There's so high you can go up the org structure. So, how do you reinvent or recreate or reintroduce yourself to not only expand the opportunities, but the real question underlying is, what do you think has to happen within the industry to keep you in this space?
Okay, so said differently, you're asking that since we feel like usually around the directorship, if you're lucky enough to even get that level of seniority within the employer brand space, if there's no other positions more senior than that you can that are available to you, and if there are, there's so few of them and so many of us that are qualified to fill them, then what do you do?
Yeah. Do you stay? Do you pivot? Do you?
I think that depends on a lot of factors. So
Sure.
for some, as long as the work feels fulfilling, the compensation is there, the culture is there, the relationship is there, and there's enough scope within the role that you have to be able to grow you enough year over year or every other year to a place where you're satisfied, then you could probably sit within the same level of seniority for quite some time. I think internally, your reputation, your relationships, the exposure you have can evolve, and it can be more of like a growing horizontally as opposed to vertically. There are opportunities there if you're satisfied and for the most part are living within what you want your role and or compensation to be. If that is not you, and it's like, nope, my North Star is that I want to be a CEO, or I want to own my own business, or I want to be a VP, or I want to be whatever these other senior role titles are, and titling is important to you, then it could be twofold. I've seen opportunities where people have created the next level position because they really want you. And you've done your job as a director in that organization, maybe they've been a senior director in that organization, and you've reached a cap, and they know that if they don't bump the lamp for you, that they won't have you. And sometimes they'll create the space for you because you are just that talented, skilled, and built that well of a relationship. And if that is you, do that. If it's not, I personally have a keen interest in more than just employer brand and recruitment marketing. I mentioned a little bit about having that, that awareness around employee experience, around, event related things and stuff like that had to do with the employee experience, a little broader than employer brand. And so I'd be intrigued by somebody who was thinking differently about how all those two things can come together in a really unique and creative way. And so that might be something that I or someone like me might want to consider. Um, I think other than that, I've seen a few also nuances where they'll let somebody who's taking on a VP role manage the employer brand space, but they also have to take on something else in order to make that VP level specifically title matter. I've also been in organizations where VP, there is a head of employer brand or talent marketing, and they're at the VP level. So there's an opportunity there potentially if that person were to move elsewhere. So there's a couple of avenues, but I also find that most of the people I've met in this space are skilled in so many things because again, this didn't used to exist at one point, and for some of us it didn't exist in a time frame that they were still actively seeking their career growth. So in the early stages of their career they were doing other things that led to this, but that make their portfolio so diverse that they could maneuver into a few other things, or maybe even create some things that will have pieces of this and pieces of comms or pieces of HR functions. Some of them have been recruiters, some of them have been in the HRBP space, things of that nature. If you want to stay within HR, I've seen some that were marketers but not talent market, but product marketing and other things of that nature. So I wouldn't lose sight of all those other skills you have, because there might be opportunity for you to create. I think that we proved that something that didn't exist once can exist. And so why not look at it that way for all your growth opportunities? Yes, if your title is director of global talent marketing or associate director of global talent marketing, then maybe director or maybe senior director is the cap at that organization. But just like that didn't exist for that organization potentially 10 years ago, 5 years ago in some cases, you can go somewhere else and there might be an opportunity for you to expand something that they didn't realize existed. I find that in my career growth and trajectory, a lot of my successes have been attributed to relationship. A lot of the time. A lot of the time, it's somebody that I've met or that I know that recommends me to somebody that I haven't met or didn't know, or somebody that I met and that I know that had an opportunity and they asked me to join forces with them, things of that nature. And so sometimes in those relational exchanges, you'll find that there's room for you to create as opposed to just take it the way that it's offered, because they're now meeting a person and that person is able to speak to what this could be and how this could evolve. That entrepreneurial spirit will get you there every single time. And so for me, it doesn't feel confined, because I really do believe that I'm open to a lot of things. I think the possibilities are broader. I think it's more about understanding the challenges within these organizations and then filling the gap. And if that aligns with your skills and capabilities, and broaden their perspective on what this all could mean.
Jules, y'all heard it first. Jay's dropping gems. It's not just the title, it's what is the expansive opportunity beyond the organization, leveraging your network, leveraging your skills that you brought into this work that can create whole new pathways and maybe start something that didn't exist somewhere else. So I love all of those answers. And thank you for that. And so, in parting, what is your question for the next guest?
In 10 years, what do you think the evolution of employer brand will be?
Ooh, look into the crystal ball. Okay. All right. That's a good one. I
I'm
can't wait to
intrigued
hear
to
what they
see what a
say.
response is to that.
Yeah, yeah. We'll certainly make sure they get that answer for you. Jade Harper, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure. I am so grateful for the time that you have generously provided to us at the Employer Branding Unfiltered and audience. Thank you again. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully, this will be the first of many conversations. But
I always
thanks for
enjoy
joining us.
talking to you.
Likewise, sis. Likewise. Will you be careful? Be safe. Be well. Enjoy the last days of this summer, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.